Follow and subscribe 5-episode thriller for more episodes. Title: The Silence Room. Episode 1 of 5, The Arrival. It was the silence that haunted him the most, not the bloodied photographs in the evidence files, not the cold steel of the handcuffs that had latched onto her wrists when they brought her in, not even the horrific condition of the body they'd pulled from the bedroom floor. No, it was her silence. Dr. Adrian Vale had dealt with broken minds before, screaming schizophrenics, paranoid executives, suicidal celebrities. But never this. A 35-year-old woman, beautiful in an eerie, clinical way, who sat across from him like a mannequin. Her gaze blank, her lips sealed. Her presence, disquieting. Her name was Elena Rhys, and 5 days ago, her husband had been found dead in their upscale Westbridge home. Multiple stab wounds. No signs of forced entry. No signs of a struggle. No defensive wounds. Just a corpse and a calm, clean woman waiting by the window, hands folded neatly in her lap. When the police arrived, she neither fled nor resisted. She didn't speak during her arrest. She didn't blink when they took her fingerprints. She didn't respond during her arraignment. She was declared mentally unfit for trial, at least until someone could figure out what, if anything, was going on behind her vacant expression. Enter Dr. Vale. The room was soft gray, a deliberate choice, designed to feel neither comforting nor intimidating. It was neutral, like Switzerland. A couch, 2 chairs, a single painting of a foggy coastline. No clocks, no ticking sounds, no distractions. Elena sat in the same position every session, back straight, hands in her lap, wearing a plain beige sweater and cotton pants issued by the institution. She didn't fidget. She didn't blink excessively. She didn't do anything. Dr. Vale sat across from her, tapping a pencil on his notepad, an old habit he was trying to break. "Good morning, Elena," he said for the 3rd time that week. "Would you like to talk today?" No response. He sighed, picked up his pen, wrote Session 3, no verbal or emotional response, minimal body movement, no reaction to tone changes or name repetition. He studied her face, perfectly symmetrical features. Eyes like deep water, nothing visible at the surface. He tried a different angle. "Let's not talk about you. Let's talk about him, about Matthew." He paused, watching for a flicker. "Your husband, the man you married 8 years ago, the man you allegedly murdered." Nothing. Vale leaned forward. "What if I told you I've read your journals?" He hadn't. The police found none. "I know what he did to you. I know why you did it. I just want to hear it from you." Still, silence. She didn't even blink differently when her husband's name was mentioned. It was like watching a glass doll with no gears inside. Or maybe the gears were turning somewhere deep beneath a mask of static. He tried again. "Do you know what they're planning, Elena? Without a confession, the prosecution will ask for indefinite psychiatric detention. You could be here for life. Is that what you want?" Silence. He leaned back, defeated but intrigued. Session 4 later that week. Vale brought in a new tactic, a recorder. He set it on the table between them and pressed the red button. "Some people find it easier to talk when they're not being directly asked questions," he said. "I'm going to tell you a story today, Elena. Maybe you'll recognize it. Maybe not." She watched him without watching him, that uncanny, almost predatory stillness. There once was a woman who married a man she thought she knew, but after a while, she began to see things. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. The way he isolated her from her friends. Little things at first. Changing passwords, replacing her medications with placebos. Gaslighting. Threats that weren't quite threats. A tightening noose. Vale watched her eyes. Still nothing. So one day, she decided she wouldn't be a victim anymore. She waited for the right moment. A kitchen knife. A rainy night. And when it was over, she felt not remorse, but relief. Because silence is better than screaming. Pause. Nothing. Vale clicked off the recorder. Sound familiar? Her gaze remained fixed on him, unwavering, and yet something was different. He couldn't name it yet, but a tiny microscopic shift had occurred. Something under the surface had moved. Session 5, Friday, Doctor. Vale walked into the room with a thick brown folder under his arm. He placed it on the table with a dull thud. "I want to show you something." He opened the file and laid out photographs. Matthew Riss's body, crime scene snapshots, blood patterns. He watched Elena's face carefully. Finally, for the briefest second, her left eyelid twitched. Progress. "You stabbed him 7 times, 4 in the chest, 3 in the abdomen. Each wound clean, deliberate. Not frenzied, not impulsive. Very methodical. I've seen rage killings. This wasn't rage. This was calculated. Surgical. No reaction. I wonder, how long were you planning it? Weeks? Months? He laid out more evidence. A receipt for a hunting knife, purchased 6 weeks before the murder. A calendar entry with a single red X on the date of Matthew's death. Then he tried something bold. You weren't alone, were you? For the first time, Elena's eyes moved. They slid from the folder to Vale's face. Just a small tilt of her gaze. He smiled not out of victory, but from fascination. There it is. A reaction. Now we're getting somewhere. Elena returned her gaze to the wall, blank again. But Vale didn't mind. The silence was cracking, slowly, painfully, but he was close to the first fissure in her fortress. That evening, he played back the recording from session 4. He slowed it down, listened carefully. At exactly 12 minutes and 14 seconds during his story, he heard something. A tiny sound. So quiet it could be missed by anyone but someone obsessed. A breath. A tiny intake of air. The kind you make when something hits too close to home. He replayed it 5 times. She was listening. She understood. Maybe she even related. Back in his office, Vale updated his notes. Subject exhibits high-level emotional control bordering on pathological detachment. No vocalization or expression, but signs of internal recognition during narrative projection. Possible trauma response. Evidence points to long-term abuse, followed by premeditated homicide. We'll continue testing narrative empathy and projected scenarios. He clicked his pen. For the first time in a long time, he felt the thrill of a real challenge. A mind not merely broken, but sealed shut with intent. He'd make her talk. She'd tell him why. It was only a matter of time. Episode 2 of 5, Echoes in the Room. The next morning, Dr. Adrian Vale arrived at the facility earlier than usual. The sky outside was still the bruised gray of pre-dawn, and the corridors echoed with the clink of janitor keys and the low hum of machines preparing for the day. He didn't need coffee today. He needed answers. He reviewed the footage of Session 5 one last time, fingers steepled against his lips, the twitch of Elena's gaze, that nearly imperceptible breath. In his world, these weren't trivial. They were seismic. He decided it was time to introduce stimuli. Session 6, Saturday. The room had changed. When Elena was brought in, her eyes flicked, subtly, but there it was, toward the far wall, where a mirror had been replaced with a canvas. A charcoal sketch drawn by a forensic artist from memory. Matthew Rhys's face. Smiling. A trap. Dr. Vale sat down across from her, but not in his usual posture. Today, he sat more relaxed. Legs slightly apart, one arm hooked lazily over the chair's side. A predator trying not to look like one. I found this in one of your old social media posts, he lied smoothly, gesturing toward the drawing. Anniversary dinner, just the two of you. Elena stared at the portrait. Blank. You cooked for him that night. I imagine you always did. You strike me as someone who keeps things tidy, predictable, controlled. She blinked. Once. He leaned forward. You weren't always like this, were you? The silence. The coldness. I think you used to be very different. I think you used to laugh. Still nothing, but her hands, those delicate, unmoving hands, twitched. A fraction of a movement. Her right thumb tapped the nail of her left index finger. Once. He said nothing. Just took mental note. Then he took out a tape recorder again. I'm going to tell you another story, Elena. You don't have to respond, but I want you to listen. Click. He let the silence stretch for a moment before speaking. There was a woman who thought she was in love. She married a man who made her feel special, even protected. But over time, she noticed strange things. Her cat died. He said it was an accident. Her brother stopped calling. She later found out the husband threatened him. She became smaller and smaller inside herself until she wasn't sure who she was anymore. Then one day, she snapped. He looked up. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She waited until he was asleep. She walked into the bedroom, and she ended him. Not because she wanted to kill him, but because she needed her voice back. Click. He shut off the recorder. Elena looked straight at him. Not through him. At him. And then her lips parted, just slightly. He held his breath, but she didn't speak. Session 7, Monday. She refused food over the weekend, drank water, slept, but didn't engage. Even the guards said she seemed creepier than usual. Vale changed tactics again. When she entered the room this time, a small music box sat on the table. White porcelain, hand-painted roses, Victorian style, unassuming. He didn't say anything. Just waited for her to notice. 30 seconds in, she glanced at it. He opened it. A delicate, haunting melody filled the room, the tune of Greensleeves, the kind of music played in old lullabies or childhood ballerina boxes. Her pupils contracted. Reaction. He spoke gently. You recognize it? No answer. I found it in the crime scene photos. On your vanity. Blood spatter on the hinge. It was open when they found you sitting in the living room, playing this song on repeat. Still silence, but her jaw clenched. He leaned forward. You opened it after you killed him. Why? Was it a ritual? A goodbye? Or was it something else? A pause. Then, the most human thing he'd seen from her, she closed her eyes. Just for a moment. He didn't press. He let the music fill the space between them. Let the memory live there. Session 8, Tuesday. It was time to push harder. I spoke to your neighbor, he said casually as she entered. Mrs. Lang lives 3 doors down. She said she heard things at night. Screams. Thumps. Glass breaking. But she never called the police. You always answered the door smiling. No reaction. She said something else interesting. He opened a file and read slowly. Sometimes I saw her in the garden late at night, standing there, barefoot, staring at the dirt. She'd stay there for hours, not moving, like she was waiting for something to come up from underneath. Elena blinked. Vale snapped the file shut. What were you burying out there, Elena? She looked up. That flicker again, the look of someone who wanted to scream but had built a dam inside their throat. You're not mute. You're hiding. From me. From them. But mostly from yourself. No response. Let's test that theory. He pulled a small item from a manila envelope and placed it on the table. A cracked locket. I had this cleaned. Found in the garden under the rose bushes. Dirt inside. Also, a small photograph. He slid it closer. You as a little girl, maybe 5, holding hands with a woman I assume is your mother. She's crying in the photo. You aren't. Elena's mouth twitched. Finally her voice. Just one word. Hoarse. Dry. As though it had crawled through a desert to be born. Not her. Vale didn't react. Didn't break the moment. Who is she then, Elena? Her eyes filled with something just shy of grief. And then, silence returned. But he'd heard it. He had it on tape. Her first word in 8 days. That night, alone in his office, Vale stared at her file. Abuse was the obvious theory, the popular one, but something didn't add up. The murder was too clean, the method too precise, the detachment too deliberate, and now this locket, the music box, the garden. Something was under the surface, something older than the marriage, something older than Matthew. He circled a phrase in his notes. Early trauma, premarital, possibly maternal. Latent dissociative pattern? Then he scribbled another line. Patient is not just suppressing memory. She may be protecting someone, or something. He glanced at the audio log again. Her one word echoed like thunder in a canyon. Not her. Who was she then? Episode 3 of 5. Title: The Silence Room. The Woman in the Garden. Dr. Adrian Vale stared at the word on the page again. Not her. It haunted him. Not just because it was the only thing Elena Rhys had spoken since her arrest, but because of how she'd said it. With dread, not anger. With fear, not grief. The kind of fear that runs deep, like roots twisted into the bone. She hadn't spoken of her mother. She hadn't denied the photo. She had simply corrected him. Not her. So who was the woman in the photograph? Session 9. Today, the room was colder. Vale had adjusted the thermostat a few degrees lower. It was a trick. Subtle discomfort could sometimes breach emotional defenses. He watched Elena shiver as she sat, though she didn't complain. She never did. I brought something else, he said, holding up a sealed envelope. It's from the Westbridge Foster Care Archive. I had to dig through state records. Seems your mother died when you were 7. House fire. But you already knew that. No reaction. Vale continued, carefully watching her. You were placed with a woman named Angela Crow, retired nurse. No criminal record. Lived on the edge of town. Never adopted. Just temporary care. Though you stayed there nearly 5 years. Still blank. He placed a photograph on the table. A grainy black and white picture. A woman in her late 50s with sharp features, long gray hair tied back, and a stern mouth. Angela Crow. Is this the woman in the locket? Elena's eyes dropped. That was new. He leaned in. She hurt you, didn't she? Elena's jaw clenched. She made you dig at night. That's what the neighbor saw. It didn't start with Matthew. It started long before. Still silence, but it was thick now. Not the clean, sterile silence of earlier sessions. This was charged, like the air before a storm. Vale tried the direct approach. What did she make you bury, Elena? That's when it happened. Her breath caught. She coughed once, violent, as though something had turned to dust inside her. Then finally her voice, barely above a whisper. Things. Vale froze. What kind of things? Elena blinked slowly. Her throat worked. She called it obedience, said the ground never lies. If it stays buried, it stays forgotten. Vale felt a chill crawl up his spine. She made you bury things to forget them? Her voice was fragile, but steady. No, she buried me. Session 10, Thursday. Vale sat in his office late into the night. He'd reviewed the session 5 times. She buried me. Not literal, of course. Or was it? He had pulled the official records on Angela Crow. She was a nurse for over 30 years. No marriage, no children. A quiet, well-liked woman. But there were whispers. 3 children from the foster system placed in her care over the years. None adopted. All transferred out. Minimal documentation. Elena had stayed the longest. He requested a special excavation order from Westbridge PD. They would check the garden behind the Rhys residence and the garden at Angela Crow's now abandoned farmhouse. Session 11, Friday morning. When Elena entered the room, she looked different. Her posture was looser, still silent but not locked in place like before, as if she'd passed through a door. Vale decided not to question her today. Instead, he pulled out a recorder and placed it on the table. I'm going to ask you to listen again, but this time, it's not a story. It's a voice. He pressed play. A static-laced recording began. A woman's voice, thin, strict, and unmistakably old. No talking at the table. You know the rules. If you speak without permission, you go in the box. Elena's face paled. Vale paused the tape. That was taken from an interview with another child placed in Angela Crow's care. They said she kept a crawl space under the floorboards, locked from the outside. He leaned forward. Did she put you in the box, Elena? A pause. Then, yes. How long would she leave you there? Hours, sometimes days. Why? Elena's voice was distant. To make me quiet. She said, noise is evil. That voices lead to sin. That silence is safety. Vale scribbled notes. Dissociative patterns, auditory suppression, compliance training, classic conditioning through abuse. And Matthew? He asked softly. Did he remind you of her? Elena didn't speak, but her eyes said yes. She made you bury your voice, Vale said, and Matthew made sure it stayed buried. Then came something unexpected. Elena reached into her sleeve and placed a small object on the table, a dirt-covered key. Vale's eyes widened. You've been holding on to this? She nodded once. What does it open? Her voice was a breath. The basement. Later that day, Westbridge PD called. Behind the Rhys home, beneath the garden, they had uncovered something. A locked cellar, sealed and buried under concrete tiles. Inside, a wooden box, roughly 4 feet long, lined with old blankets, stains, claw marks. Inside the box, a second locket, identical to the first, but this one had a name etched inside. Angela. And a photo of her and Matthew Rhys. Session 12, Friday evening. Vale sat across from Elena, the weight of everything between them. I think I finally understand, he said. You didn't kill Matthew out of rage or revenge. You killed him because of what he was. She looked up. Tears brimmed in her eyes for the first time. He knew her, didn't he? Elena nodded. Her nephew. And he found you later, married you, because you were trained to be silent, obedient, just like she made you. Elena whispered. He said she taught him everything he knew. Val closed his eyes. The puzzle finally assembled. You thought if you killed him, you could kill her too. Elena nodded. But trauma doesn't die with the abuser, he said gently. It burrows. You've buried your voice so deeply, you don't know how to speak for yourself anymore. Then he asked the question that had haunted every session. Why didn't you speak at first? Elena's answer was barely audible. Because I thought, if I stayed silent long enough, I'd disappear. That night, Dr. Vale wrote his most important note yet. Subject is not psychotic. She is profoundly traumatized. Her silence is a learned behavior, a survival strategy. Confession obtained through narrative reconstruction and recovered memory. Recommend intensive trauma therapy, not incarceration. And at the bottom, voice restored partially. Burial complete, symbolically. Watch for relapse. He shut the folder, but something still gnawed at him. The second locket, the box in the basement, the photo. Angela Crow had been dead for decades, so why did that photo look like it had been taken just 2 years ago? Episode 4 of 5, The Crawl Space, 11:47 p.m. Dr. Adrian Vale couldn't sleep. The photo inside the second locket lay on his desk, lit only by the amber glow of a desk lamp. Angela Crow and Matthew Rhys. The date on the back read July 3rd, 2021, just 3 years ago. But Angela had been reported dead in 1996. Gas leak. Body cremated. File closed. So how was she in a photograph taken nearly 30 years later? Vale felt something deeper than unease. It wasn't just the mystery. It was Elena's eyes, the way they had filled with tears when she finally spoke, but also the way they flinched when she said the name. Angela Crow wasn't just a phantom in Elena's past. She might still be alive. Or worse. Session 13, Saturday morning. Elena sat differently today. Not tense, not robotic, but not at peace either. Her posture was alert, like someone expecting danger at any moment, as though she'd only paused her escape, not ended it. Vale placed the photo on the table, gently sliding it forward. "You never said she was alive." Elena didn't speak. "I thought you killed Matthew because he reminded you of her. But that wasn't the whole truth, was it?" Her lips parted. "He wasn't just like her." He leaned in. "Then what?" Elena's voice was low and mechanical, as if reciting something buried in rote memory. "She came back." Vale froze. "She came back when?" "After the miscarriage. I was weak. Matt said we needed someone to help, someone he trusted. I didn't know. I didn't know it was her until she walked into the house." Elena's hands trembled. She'd changed her name, wore a wig, but I knew. She smiled and I remembered. All of it. Vale's stomach turned. "You didn't report it?" Elena looked up, eyes raw. She said no one would believe me, that my silence protected us both, and Matthew believed her. He called it therapy, said she was helping me heal. "What did she do, Elena?" Elena closed her eyes. She took the crawl space. Back to the Rhys house. 3 Val returned to the Rhys home, this time escorted by Detective Mara Kent. She was skeptical, but curious. "You're saying this woman, Angela Crow, was living in the house with them for months?" she asked, leading him around the back. Vale nodded. "It's not in the official reports because Elena never mentioned her. She wasn't hiding her crime. She was hiding Angela." The garden had already been disturbed, tiles ripped up, soil overturned, but Vale directed them to the far corner, near the edge of the old shed. "There was a second trapdoor," he said. "Not under the garden. Under the tool shed. They found it. Rusted hinges, heavy with moisture, but it opened. A ladder descended into pitch-black dirt. Detective Kent went first. Vale followed, ducking under a low beam. The crawlspace was silent, and then the flashlight caught something. A cot, a chair, a tape recorder, a bucket, a fraying length of rope, and scrawled on the wooden wall in red marker, "I never left." Detective Kent swallowed hard, Jesus, but Vale was staring at something else. A stack of cassette tapes, each labeled with a date and a name. He picked one up. Elena, Session 4, Obedience Reinforcement. They weren't therapy tapes. They were conditioning sessions. Back at the facility, Sunday, Vale confronted Elena with the tape. She turned pale. "You didn't kill Matthew because he hurt you," Vale said. "You killed him because he invited her back in, because he let her do to you again what she did as a child." Elena nodded. "I didn't remember everything," she said. "She used the music box, the dark, the box in the basement. I started blacking out, losing time. Sometimes I'd wake up in the crawl space. Sometimes I'd wake up in my bed. I didn't know what was real anymore." Val pressed gently. "Did you kill her too?" Elena hesitated. "I tried." Sunday evening, police archive lab. The forensics team digitized the tapes. What they found was harrowing. Angela's voice was clear, sharp, dominant. She wasn't pretending to be someone else. She was still herself. And she was proud of what she did. "You're lucky, Elena. Most girls like you fall apart. But you stay quiet. You listen. That's why Matthew loves you. Because you've been polished." The sessions weren't just obedience training. They were rituals. Hours of repetition, music, darkness, deprivation. Vale listened to 5 hours of tapes before stopping. Angela hadn't just survived the fire. She'd planned her return. Session 14, Monday morning. Elena looked lighter. She had slept for the first time in weeks. No guards had reported screaming, no restraint orders needed. Something inside her had cracked, and through it, air was finally flowing. Vale sat across from her, weary but clear. I believe you, Elena. About everything. I thought I had to be silent to survive, she said. But silence was what kept me hers. Speaking is the only way out. Tell me what happened the night you killed Matthew. She exhaled. I found one of her tapes. Not labeled. Just sitting in the kitchen. Playing. I think he left it there on purpose. He called it nostalgia. Her voice hardened. But it wasn't nostalgia. It was a warning, a threat, a reminder of who I was, who she made me. She paused. I went to the basement. The crawl space was open. Her scent was there. The lavender oil, the rope, the blankets. I realized then she'd never really left. Not physically, but in here, she touched her chest. She still owned me. She looked up at Vale. So I took the knife from the kitchen, walked upstairs, and I stopped being hers. Monday night, Vale filed the final report. Recommended full psychological evaluation, not trial. Elena would be transferred to a trauma recovery facility in Vermont. Secure, compassionate, private. Before she left, she handed him a final item. A note. Inside, one sentence. She taught me silence. You taught me voice. And under that, a second line. A different handwriting, scrawled and jagged. We are never done. Episode 5 of 5, the final tape. 6 weeks later, Vermont Trauma Recovery Center. Dr. Adrian Vale stood outside a small, secure room at the end of the corridor. It had taken weeks of legal wrangling, court orders, and psychiatric board evaluations to get Elena Rhys transferred here. But it had worked. Inside, Elena sat by the window. Her hair was longer now. She wore a soft sweater instead of a prison uniform. She looked real, human, not a ghost. But her eyes were still watchful, always watching. She turned when she saw him. You came, she said. Voice calm. I said I would. Most people say that. You meant it. Vale nodded, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. He took a seat across from her. No table between them this time. Just open space. I'm not here to question you anymore, he said. I'm here because of a discovery. Elena tilted her head. We found something buried under Angela's farmhouse. Not in the crawl space. Underneath it. Cement slab, reinforced. He pulled a photo from his coat pocket and handed it to her. In it, a sealed metal cabinet. Inside were dozens of tapes. Some labeled, others not, but one stood out. Handwritten in red ink, the final tape for ER. 2 weeks earlier, Westbridge Evidence Lab. The tape had been analyzed in silence. No one wanted to listen to it twice. Angela's voice was distorted, not from age or wear, but intentionally altered, slowed, and laced with background noise. Music. A children's lullaby. Out of tune. If you're hearing this, Elena, then he failed. Or you succeeded. Or maybe both. Vale gritted his teeth. The recording continued. There is no version of you that doesn't belong to me. I stitched myself into your silences, your shame, your forgetting. You killed the boy, but not the message. Angela's laugh was faint, thin as tissue paper. You're going to remember everything now, not because you want to, but because I left you no other way. Then a phrase repeated. The garden doesn't forget. The garden doesn't forget. The garden doesn't forget. Click. That was it. But Vale had felt something impossible while hearing it. Angela Crow had known what would happen. She had recorded it not as a message, but as a seed. Present, Vermont. I want to ask you something, Vale said. Elena looked up. Ask. Do you ever hear her still? At night? There was a long silence, not fear, not hesitation, but calculation. Yes, she said, sometimes in the walls, sometimes in the rustling leaves. But it's not her anymore. Then what is it? Elena met his eyes. It's the part of me she made, the echo. Vale sat back. Elena, the final tape, it wasn't just a message. It was a trigger, auditory anchors, phrases meant to reawaken buried commands. Have you? I destroyed it, she interrupted. You heard it? She nodded. I had to. It was the only way to know what she'd left behind. Vale stared at her. You risked a full psychological collapse. She gave a strange smile. Not joy, not relief. Better to face the ghost than keep feeding it in the dark. Later that evening, Vale walked the wooded trail behind the facility, letting the cold wind bite through his coat. The weight of the past month settled like a stone on his shoulders. Angela Crow had been declared officially deceased again. This time, for real. Her remains had been recovered behind a false wall in the farmhouse. Mummified. Dressed in a nurse's uniform. slashed across the throat. Elena's doing. Likely the real murder that night. Matthew had tried to stop her from finishing what she started, tried to protect his aunt, his teacher, his handler. Elena had silenced them both, but she hadn't buried the past. Not yet. Tuesday. Final session. I want to record this, Val said, setting up the small mic. For the courts, but also for you. Elena nodded. Let's make it real. Tell me about the day you buried her. The room stilled. I waited until he left for work. She was downstairs, making tea, humming that horrible song. I had the knife in my pocket for days but couldn't move. That day, something changed. I remembered the crawl space, the smell, the things she made me do. Her fingers clenched. She looked up at me and said, "There's my quiet girl." And I just snapped. Vale listened without writing, just watching her. I stabbed her. Not fast, not clean. It wasn't anger, it was removal, like cutting out a tumor. She didn't even scream. She just smiled. A tear slid down Elena's cheek. She said, "Now you'll never be alone." Wednesday. Dr. Vale submitted his full report to the court. Elena Rhys is not a danger to others except those who attempt to reimpose the trauma she has survived. Her crime, while violent, was the end of a cycle of ritualistic abuse and psychological torture that began in childhood and was reintroduced in adulthood. She deserves care, not a cell. Verdict: institutional rehabilitation with biannual court review. But privately, Vale wrote something else. In his own journal, there are wounds that never bleed. They just whisper. And some ghosts don't want to be laid to rest. They want to be heard. 1 year later, private practice office. A package arrived. No return address. Just a locket inside. The same one Vale had seen in Elena's hand. Inside, a new photo. Elena standing in a wide field, hair loose, smiling, alone. And a note. I buried her. I buried the echo too. I can hear my own voice now. Thank you. Vale closed the locket. There were no more sessions, no more recordings, only silence. And this time, it was earned. Follow and subscribe 5-episode thriller for more episodes.